All right, so get this. We're diving into some JFK stuff.
Right.
But not the usual stuff you hear. You know, we're going way beyond that Warren report, the one that said Oswald acted alone and all that.
Right, right.
You shared this whole stack of stuff from Dealey Plaza, UK.
Yeah.
This group that's been, like, digging into what they think the government's been hiding about this whole thing.
Well, they've been at it for a while.
Oh, yeah.
And what we're looking at here is their newsletter from the 50th anniversary.
Okay.
Back in 2013. And
Oh.
why? It's got articles, book reviews, even a little bit of fiction.
Interesting.
It's like this time capsule of how people were looking back at the case, you know, when they were releasing all those files.
Okay, so 50 years later, what was the vibe around the JFK assassination?
Well, I mean, think about it. A whole generation had grown up with these questions.
Right.
All these rumors.
Oh, yeah?
So 2013 was kind of this time of renewed interest, people kind of pushing back against the official story. And groups like Dealey Plaza UK were right at the forefront.
Yeah, they don't mess around.
No, they don't.
One of the first things that caught my eye was this Alaric Roseman taking on the mortal error theory.
Yeah.
You know, the one where the Secret Service agent accidentally shoots JFK?
Right.
What's up with that?
He just completely dismantles it, like, piece by piece.
Really?
And it's striking how he highlights, you know, how unlikely it is that a trained agent would just snap and, you know, fire a shot in that chaos.
Right.
It makes you wonder if that theory was almost like designed to be debunked.
Yeah.
You know, to distract from something else.
Oh, like a smoke screen?
Yeah, misdirection, exactly.
I'm already hooked.
He doesn't stop there, though.
Okay.
He really goes into the lack of evidence.
Like what?
You know, no consistent reports from the Secret Service.
Yeah.
No eyewitnesses who actually saw this agent fire.
Uh-huh.
It starts to feel like a story built on whispers, not facts.
Okay, so if we're tossing out mortal error, where do we even go from there? What does this Rosman guy think happened?
Well, he doesn't say explicitly,
Okay.
but you can tell he believes there's more to it.
Oh,
So-
so he's leaving us hanging.
He's saying, don't just accept the easy answer, look closer.
All right, challenge accepted.
Exactly.
Speaking of looking closer, there's this other letter that goes deep on Lee Harvey Oswald himself,
Oh, yeah.
but with a twist I did not see coming.
This is Jason Wilcox
Okay.
and his exploration of the two Oswalds.
Wait. Two Oswalds?
Harvey and Lee, he calls them.
Is this a twin situation? A doppelganger thing?
So Wilcox lays out this idea that they were both part of some Cold War scheme,
Okay.
intentionally playing these roles, like almost exaggerated roles.
Give me an example I'm not following.
Like, remember how Oswald failed that Russian language test?
Uh-huh.
Wilcox thinks that could have been on purpose,
Really?
to make him seem like a, you know, hardcore communist sympathizer.
So he's like a bad actor, but in real life?
Exactly.
Okay, my brain is officially melting. What else does this Wilcox guy have?
Well, he points to those eyewitness accounts, right?
Yeah.
How some people described Oswald one way, other people totally different.
Oh, right.
Wilcox thinks it's because they were seeing two different guys
Whoa.
who were kind of mimicking each other.
Hold on, I've got chills. So we're talking about imposters, maybe even more than just two Oswalds?
Right.
What about his mother, Marguerite? Was she even real?
Wilcox even brings up that possibility, you know, of a fake Marguerite.
Oh my gosh.
It gets into these questions of identity deception.
Yeah.
It's a hall of mirrors.
This is wild.
It is.
Okay, let's switch gears for a second. There's this book review that looks at the politics around JFK before his death.
You're talking about Bill Beadle's review of JFK's last 100 days.
That's the one.
Yeah.
It's not just like a boring history lesson.
No.
Beadle makes a case that JFK was ticking off some powerful people with his policies, like the nuclear test ban treaty, his support for civil rights, even talk of pulling out of Vietnam.
He was going up against the military-industrial complex, the anti-Castro Cubans.
Right. And those are not people you want to mess with.
No, these were people who had reason to see JFK as a problem.
And the book suggests that JFK knew this, that he was even worried about a military coup.
Yeah, Beadle brings up this one moment where JFK is joking with Lyndon Johnson about Johnson maybe, you know, orchestrating a coup.
Oh my God.
Adds a whole new layer to it, doesn't it?
It does. I'm starting to see why this Dealey Plaza UK group is so suspicious.
Right.
But they're not just throwing out crazy theories.
Oh, they're not.
They're digging into the evidence itself. Like there's this whole article about the Zapruder film.
Oh, yeah, that home movie that caught the assassination.
Exactly.
Chris Scally's piece on the Zapruder film is really something.
What's he saying?
He tracks the chain of custody meticulously, like who had it when, where it's like he becomes a detective.
So he's trying to shut down those claims that the film was fake or tampered with.
Yeah, exactly. He uses affidavits, eyewitness accounts. He builds a really compelling case for the film's authenticity.
Wow. It's amazing how much work goes into debunking these things.
It is. It really is.
But that's what they're all about, right? This
Yeah.
group digging deeper.
They're challenging us to think critically, to question what we think we know.
I like it.
Yeah.
And speaking of questioning what we know, we need to talk about Roger Craig.
Oh, yeah.
This is where things get really weird.
This is a rabbit hole.
Yeah.
Roger Craig, a Dallas deputy sheriff, claimed to have seen Oswald fleeing the scene right after the assassination.
Okay, so what makes Craig's story so different from what we've heard?
Well, first off, he puts Oswald in Will Fritz's office.
Okay.
Which Fritz himself denies ever happened.
So either Craig was lying or Fritz was lying.
Right. And if Craig's telling the truth, it throws the whole timeline out the window.
What else is there on this guy?
Well, his life after the assassination is a string of bizarre incidents.
Like what?
Car accident, a shooting a bomb attempt.
Are you serious?
He ended up dying in 75, ruled a suicide. But
a car crash? A shooting, then a bomb? Are we really supposed to think that's all just coincidence?
It's hard to say for sure. Was he a credible witness who knew too much and they wanted to silence him? Or was he, like some people say, just an unreliable guy prone to making things up?
I am getting some X-Files vibes from this.
Yeah, it's definitely got that feel.
And it gets even more intense when you bring in Jack Ruby, the guy who killed Oswald.
Right. The newsletter has notes from a seminar Dealey Plaza, UK, held on Ruby.
Okay.
And they clearly see him as way more than just a lone wolf looking for revenge.
Yeah, this wasn't just some random guy. He ran a nightclub. He had connections to the police organized crimes.
Exactly. They dive into his insistence that he needed to go to Washington to tell his truth.
Huh.
Like he was genuinely terrified of saying anything in Dallas.
Like someone was going to silence him.
It's possible, and the notes also point out those connections Ruby had that the Warren report kind of downplayed.
Like what?
Mafia ties links to anti-Castro Cubans.
So are we saying Ruby was part of something bigger, a pawn in a larger game?
That's the question that keeps researchers coming back, and these seminar notes definitely feed into that. It's like the deeper you dig, the more you realize how much we don't know.
My mind is officially blown.
Yeah.
Before we go down that rabbit hole any further,
Okay.
There's one last thing from this newsletter that I think kind of bridges fact and fiction.
You talking about the excerpt from the novel JFK Endgame Dallas?
That's It by Alan Pappitt.
Yeah.
And it starts with this crazy scene of the assassin just casually eating watermelon after shooting JFK.
It's a very vivid image.
It's so jarring. It's like...
Right? It stays with you.
But then it shifts to this present-day character who's obsessed with the assassination. Like, he's trying to make sense of it all.
Yeah, it's like Pappitt saying that we're all trying to write our own narratives about JFK, you know, fill in the blanks with our own theories.
Right.
It really highlights how much this case still fascinates people.
Yeah.
You know, how we all want answers.
Well, we might not have all the answers.
No, we don't.
But we've definitely uncovered some interesting clues in this first part of our deep dive.
We have. There's a lot more to come.
I can't wait.
Yeah, join us in part 2 as we keep going through this Dealey Plaza UK newsletter and dig even deeper into the JFK assassination. You won't want to miss it.
I'll be here.
Welcome back to our deep dive into Dealey Plaza UK's 50th anniversary newsletter.
It's crazy how, even after like 5 decades, the JFK assassination still gets people talking.
Yeah, you know what's interesting is how this newsletter really goes after the official story.
Oh, yeah.
It's not just presenting other theories. They're really picking apart that Warren report.
Right, the one that everyone says is like full of holes.
Exactly.
One thing that stood out to me was how much they focus on the Secret Service.
Yeah.
It's not just about what they did like right after the shooting, but their whole role in the investigation.
You have to remember, they basically took over from the Dallas Police Department.
Oh, yeah.
And there are still questions about, you know, why they moved the autopsy to a military hospital.
Right, why not do it in Dallas?
Exactly.
And then there's all this stuff about the reports from Parkland Hospital not matching up with the official autopsy.
Right, it just adds to the suspicion.
Totally.
And the newsletter really gets into all of that.
Okay.
They don't necessarily have all the answers.
Right.
But they're asking the right questions.
Yeah, like, was this a cover-up from the beginning?
It makes you wonder.
This all kind of comes back to Roger Craig, right?
Yeah.
The deputy sheriff we talked about.
The one who said he saw Oswald running away?
Exactly.
His story is like it was deliberately buried.
And all those weird things that happened to him after the assassination.
Yeah, like the car crash, the shooting the bomb.
You can't tell me that was just bad luck.
Right? Was he a threat to someone?
Someone who wanted to keep the truth hidden?
The author really explores that idea.
Okay.
Even suggesting that maybe the Warren Commission messed with witness testimony to make Craig look bad.
How would they do that?
Well, they point to the testimony from the taxi driver and the bus driver.
Okay.
Who supposedly saw Oswald far away from the book depository.
Right.
At the same time that Craig said he saw him running away.
Yeah. So they're saying the commission cherry-picked the evidence that fit their story.
And ignored anything that didn't.
And the fact that they never really looked into Craig's claims about seeing Oswald in Will Fritz's office.
It raises a lot of questions.
What were they so afraid of finding?
Exactly.
Speaking of unsettling, we got to talk more about Jack Ruby.
Yeah.
The guy who shot Oswald.
He wasn't just some hothead who snapped, right?
No way.
The seminar notes from Dealey Plaza, UK, paint a much more complicated picture.
Yeah, they go deep into his background.
Nightclub owner connections to the cops and the mob.
It's like he lived in this whole other world.
Right, a world the Warren report barely touched.
And remember how he was freaking out about going to Washington to tell his truth?
Like he was afraid to say anything in Dallas.
Terrified.
The notes even talk about his ties to the Mafia guys, like Santo Trafficante.
Hold on, so we're talking about a link between Ruby organized crime and the assassination itself.
It's a possibility.
This is heavy.
It definitely suggests that the whole lone gunman thing with Ruby is way too simple.
Too many unanswered questions.
Too many shady connections.
This whole newsletter is like, that isn't it?
Yeah.
The idea that the official story is not the whole story.
It's a call to be skeptical, to look closer.
I like that.
To question everything you think you know.
Okay, so we've talked about alternative theories, the politics behind the assassination, but there's one part of this newsletter that brings it back to the human side of things.
You're talking about the JFK assassination quiz.
Exactly.
Right.
It's not just about trivia.
No, it highlights those people, those stories that usually get forgotten.
Okay, give me a question. Let's see if I pass.
All right, who announced JFK's death for CBS?
Walter Cronkite.
You got it. But the quiz also mentions Malcolm Kilduff.
Who's that?
The White House press secretary.
Oh.
He's the one who actually made the official announcement at Parkland Hospital.
It's crazy to think about what that must have been like.
To have to deliver that kind of news?
It was a day that changed so many lives.
Absolutely.
Okay, hit me with another question.
All right, here's a tougher one. Who was driving the Secret Service car right behind JFK's limo in the motorcade?
Don't know.
Samuel Kinney.
Okay.
It might seem like a small thing, but, you know, understanding the security details, who was where.
Yeah, it all matters.
When you're trying to piece together what happened.
Right, it's like those crime shows where they recreate the whole scene to figure out, you know, where the shots came from.
And then you have the witnesses.
Right.
The quiz asks about Howard Brennan, the guy who saw the shooting from across the street.
He's the one who described the shooter.
Yeah, and his account was super important.
But people question whether he was reliable.
Right, like how accurate was his memory?
And of course there's Abraham Zapruder.
His home movie is like the most famous piece of evidence.
Everyone's seen that footage.
The quiz even asks about the Secret Service agent who jumped onto the back of the limo after the shots.
That was Clint Hill.
Right. His actions have been debated forever.
Was he trying to protect JFK and Jackie, or was it already too late?
You watch the Zapruder film, but you can never really know what was going through his head.
It's one of those things that just stays with you.
This quiz really brings all those individual perspectives back into focus.
It reminds you that history is made up of all these personal stories.
And sometimes those stories challenge the official version of events.
That's where Alex Cox's article, The Sixth Decade Begins, comes in.
Oh yeah, he doesn't hold back.
Not at all. He goes after the media for sticking with the lone gunman theory.
Even after all this time.
50 years and all this evidence.
Like they're stuck in the past.
Afraid to question anything.
And he's not a fan of those anniversary documentaries either.
The ones that are all about the drama.
Sensationalism over substance.
Right.
But he's not completely hopeless.
Okay.
He sees a lot of promise in the work of independent researchers, filmmakers.
The people who are pushing the boundaries.
Exactly, the ones who aren't afraid to challenge the status quo.
I like it.
He's reminding us that this search for truth is a marathon, not a sprint.
You got to keep at it.
And sometimes it takes a little bit of healthy skepticism.
Yeah, question everything.
Exactly. And as we wrap up this part of our deep dive, I think it's important to remember that the search for truth is just as important as the truth itself.
That's a good point.
You know, we might never have all the answers.
Right.
But the journey is what matters. You know, by looking at the evidence, considering different viewpoints.
Having these discussions.
We keep JFK's memory alive, and his legacy continues to inspire us.
Well said.
So stay tuned for part 3, where we'll finish up this fascinating collection of sources and see where the truth leads us.
Welcome back to our deep dive into the JFK assassination. We're wrapping up our look at this Dealey Plaza UK newsletter from the 50th anniversary.
Yeah, this thing has been a wild ride.
Seriously, we've gone down so many rabbit holes.
So many theories, so much evidence.
It's amazing how much there is to unpack.
And this last part is where we get into those little details, the stuff that usually gets lost in the big picture.
Like zooming in on a specific part of a photo and seeing things you never noticed before.
Exactly. And this newsletter has this really interesting JFK assassination quiz.
Oh, yeah, I remember seeing that.
And it's not just about trivia. It's like they're highlighting these lesser-known figures and events that are actually really important.
Okay, hit me with a question. Let's see if I remember anything.
All right, here's one who announced JFK's death for CBS.
Oh, that's easy. Walter Cronkite?
You got it. But the quiz also mentions Malcolm Kilduff.
Who's that?
The White House press secretary. He was the one who actually made the formal announcement.
At Parkland Hospital, right?
Yeah, it's like we get this behind-the-scenes glimpse of that day.
It makes you think about all those people who were just thrust into these crazy situations.
Right, they had to deal with the news, the aftermath.
Yeah.
It must have been so surreal.
Absolutely. All right, give me another question. I'm on a roll.
Okay, here's a tougher one. Who was driving the Secret Service car right behind JFK's limo in the motorcade?
I have no idea.
Samuel Kinney.
Okay.
It might seem like a small detail.
Right.
But it's all connected, the security arrangements, who was where.
Yeah, it all matters when you're trying to figure out what happened.
Exactly like on those crime shows where they recreate the whole scene.
To see if the shot could have come from, a certain angle.
Right, and then you have the witnesses.
Like Howard Brennan?
Yeah, the guy who saw the shooting from across the street.
He's the one who gave the description of the shooter.
And his account was so important for the investigation.
But I remember reading that people questioned his story.
Yeah, they wondered if his memory was accurate.
It's been 50 years.
Exactly. And then, of course, you have Abraham Zapruder.
With the famous home movie.
Probably the most analyzed piece of evidence in history.
And the quiz even asks about the Secret Service agent who jumped onto the back of the limo.
Clint Hill.
Right after the shots were fired.
Yeah, people still debate what he was doing.
Trying to shield JFK and Jackie, or was it already too late?
You watch the Zapruder film, but you can't get inside his head.
It's one of those things you just keep replaying in your mind.
I think this quiz really brings it back to the human element.
Right. It's not just about the theories and the politics.
It's about the individual experiences.
The people who were there.
And how those stories sometimes challenge the official narrative.
Speaking of which, this newsletter ends with a pretty powerful piece by Alex Cox.
The sixth decade begins.
Yeah, he really goes after the mainstream media.
Doesn't hold back at all.
He's like, why are you guys still pushing the lone gunman theory? After all this time.
All this evidence to the contrary.
It's like they're afraid to question the official story.
And he's not a fan of those anniversary documentaries either.
The ones that are more about entertainment than truth.
Yeah, style over substance.
But he's not completely pessimistic.
Oh, good.
He sees hope in the work of independent researchers, filmmakers.
The people who are keeping the case alive, exactly the ones who aren't afraid to challenge the system.
It's inspiring to see that passion.
It gives me hope that maybe someday we'll actually get the full story.
As we wrap up this deep dive, it's kind of overwhelming.
It is. There's so much to take in.
All this information, the different perspectives, the rabbit holes.
It shows you how powerful this event still is.
The JFK assassination.
It still captivates us, challenges us, makes us think about our history.
And ourselves.
Even if we never know for sure who killed JFK and why.
This journey has been worth it.
Absolutely.
Ooh.
It's reminded us to think critically, to question what we're told.
To never stop searching for the truth.
And to remember the human cost of this tragedy.
The lives that were lost, the families who were affected.
The JFK assassination was a turning point in history, and its legacy is still with us today.
By understanding the past, we can hopefully build a better future.
Well said. Thanks for joining us on this incredible journey.
We hope you enjoyed our deep dive into Dealey Plaza UK's 50th anniversary newsletter.
And remember, the truth is out there.